Alright, Diablo 4 Minion players, Season 8, what new toys do we have? Well, it actually comes down to a new aspect for specifically having these minions explode. But at the start, you don't want to run this, and I'll go ahead and show you guys exactly why. So, what we want to do is not have that aspect equipped. And the reason why we don't want to have this aspect equipped, at least in the very beginning, is because otherwise you will not get your minions to be able to come out. Because what happens is they will constantly be exploding. And you want your mages to survive. Your mages will basically become immortal, but you'll see the other ones, well, they're going to start draining very, very fast. Right now there's a bunch of corpses, so it's automatically going to activate Raised Skeleton. But if you don't have corpses in the very beginning, when you're trying to acquire those corpses, you want to unequip that aspect. So let's go ahead and just show off some gameplay. We'll do the brand new incursion. Let's go ahead and just move to the zone. But at the start of it, this is kind of key to the build, is that you want to remove the aspect, because if you do not, what happens is it will constantly keep on summoning the warriors, because the warriors take priority over the mages. So that's very important to go ahead and mention. So how does the build play, and what is the exact build? So we'll show off some of the gameplay. Just as a heads up, this is not going to be an insane boss or pit pushing build. It is capable. I'll have some gameplay of it doing the Tormented 4 bosses. But again, it is not going to one-shot them like the Blood Wave or any of the variants like the Sorceress with like the Evade Bird. But it is still a very fun build, and remember, we're in the brand new World Tier 4, but it is still capable of handling all content. But keep in mind, this is PTR, things are subject to change. So what happens is these minions, after a duration, will just explode, and then they're going to do more damage. Now, our skeleton mages in return get to do way more damage and basically become immortal. Most of the damage, though, is coming from the mages, because that's what you want to focus in on the build. But pretty much in terms of how it plays, it's very similar to any other minion build. I've made this one to be super easy and lazy for the playstyle. Pretty much you just activate Soul Rift. If you want to activate Blight, the enemies will take a little bit more damage. It also kind of makes your minions kind of attack, because unlike, let's say, Path of Exile, there's no minions are aggressive sort of like aspect. But pretty much you can see there's a 999M over here. The build does do damage. It's just that how the build kind of works in general is that you need to be able to activate your Ring of the Mendel, which is something that recently did get kind of fixed over on Season 7. But in Season 8, the main star of the players in terms of our minions is going to be specifically the mages, because how it works is the skeleton warriors, they're going to explode on death. Now, they lose 25% of their life per second while in combat. There's that bonus, and then also the skeleton mages take 90% less damage, and then they deal, right now I have this in my amulet, but you can run this on a two-hander if you want to, but it's that they will deal a lot more damage. You can see the amount of damage that they have is increased by quite a bit. They also did buff one of the things on the key passive for Season 8, and this is Kalan's Edict. It says when one of your minions die, your other minions enrage, dealing 20x increased damage for 3 seconds. So your minions, the warriors, are going to constantly die. However, the mages are basically immortal. They will not really be taking any damage. So there's going to be 2 different variants that you can play, and I will also be linking both of these for you guys. But here's what it comes down to. We're going to do like an in-game one, and then I'll also link these in the planner, and then I'll also give you guys a updated one later down the line if we need to make some changes. So for starters, let's go over the gear, and we're going to start off with the helmet. So you can either play Harlequin, or you can actually play the Air of Perdition. Air of Perdition is more damage. Harlequin makes it a lot smoother because you get a lot more survivability. If you want to run Tyrael's Might, that is another option for the chest piece, or the Shroud of False Death. I really like both of them. They're both great, but obviously Tyrael's is going to give you max res and way more survivability, but this will give you some more damage. And we are running, as far as the runes go, Igni Ohm, which is very common to run Ohm in every single build. And then we also happen to have Nagu Quacks. So Nagu just means that as long as we have our minions, which goes up to 6, we will be able to activate any other skill, and it's going to spend all of our primary resource, increase all of the damage that we deal by 100%. It's a very short duration, but it's great when you have all these minions, because they're all going to get that big bonus. Well, to be honest, most of the time the warriors will be dead, but the mages are the star player of this build. And then we're running the Behemoth's Brawlers. gloves over here. So it's just anything with any offensive aspect is totally fine. But what we want to temper on that is important. We want to get critical strike damage everywhere in the build. We also can get attack speed, because that does also help out with the build, and then also soul rift duration. And then for our pants, we're going to be running the Blood Moon Breaches. This allows us to give extra bonuses specific to Hellbent Commander. And then also it has a chance for the minions to apply a debuff on the enemies, basically cursing them so you will do more damage. And then you also deal more damage to the cursed enemies with its bonus. And then we're running Occult Dominion so we can get even more mages over here. It also gives us increased skeletal warriors. And then again, Soul Rift Duration is kind of what you're looking for. Now you can play two-handed here if you want to. There's actually a lot of different options. I opted to go for Frenzy Dead, and then also running the reanimation over here. So our mages are going to be basically surviving forever, so they do a lot more damage. You can also run Great Feast. However, Great Feast has a overlap with the Quacks, which can kind of cause some issues. So if you want to run that, that's also a great option, but there's really not that much room anyways. You can run this over here in your amulet, which is Service and Sacrifice. This one gives us our big multiplier. So either if you want to run a two-handed scythe, that's totally fine. I opted to go for specifically running a focus here, and the reason why is originally I had CDR on it. It depends on your rolls. Now, to be honest, right now in the PTR, I have God rolls. Everyone's got like really crazy gear. Requiring someone to get a greater affix, Harlequin Crest, that's very rare. So if you don't happen to have one, which I'm going to be honest, that's going to be most of the time, unless you're sitting there playing 30 hours a day, you're probably going to want to try to shoot for a offhand with cooldown reduction, because Behemoth is going to give you a bonus, and you need to constantly activate your Soul Rift, as that's going to basically deal enough damage to kill the enemies on its own. Not with Soul Rift itself, but with one of the boss powers. It lets you essentially gain those corpses for the minions, because we're not going to be waiting to generate corpses off of like one of the basic skills, which is something you can do as well, but I just really like the snappier playstyle of not requiring it. But again, you can play a two-hander here. Ideally with the tempers, again, critical strike damage everywhere, and then you want chance for skeletal mage attacks to happen twice, because that is your star player here. So you can run Frenzy Dead, you can run Reanimation, Service and Sacrifice, and then also, if you really want to, you can run the one that's going to reduce your essence, but again, you'll run into problems with Quacks, because that also drains your essence, because, well, Soul Rift is going to give you all of your essence, and then you're also going to be spending your essence with Blight. So I just found it to be much better to drop the other aspect. Again, the name of that one is the aspect of the Great Feast. So again, you do technically get another multiplier here, but again, you lose out on 7 essence per second, since that's the amount of minions that we have. So you can see, you could technically also get around that by just getting essence per second, but it's up to you. It could be something that you can swap in and out. You could actually run it in a ring slot if you want to make the build a little bit harder, and I will give you guys both versions of the build. But in the amulet, we ideally want to get cooldown reduction, and then also Soul Rift Duration or ultimate cooldown reduction. It's kind of up to you, whatever you want to go for. And then again, we want crit everywhere. Getting Hellbent Commander is the ideal GA instead of, let's say, life here. That would be kind of the good roll here. And then we are also running the Ring of the Sacrilegious Soul, and the reason why we would like this item is because it automatically does raise skeleton. Otherwise, with this build, because they constantly die, you will have to manually push this a lot. So if you want to run without this, that is definitely possible. But again, it's just kind of annoying. And then you also have to manually cast the Corpse Tendrils, or if you want to add Corpse Explosion, that is something that you can add in as well. And then we have the Ring of Vendel, which is in every single sort of minion build now. It's really good. Ideally, getting a GA to specifically the Mastery, or maybe the Summon Attack Speed, or like the good GAs to hit here. And then for offhand, again, I originally had CDR, but I've got so much now that it doesn't matter. In fact, it's going to be quite easy to get the cooldown reductions met. So again, you can totally run a two-hander in this build. And the reason why is because it's part of the boss powers. But before the boss powers, we got to go over the Book of the Dead. So there are 2 versions you can play. You can mainly focus in on the Shadow Mages, though, and drop the Golem completely. But I like the Golem. He gives us extra survivability. But just like every single build, it's always going to be the Reapers because it's reducing the cooldown. Then with the Skeletal Mages, obviously, you run the Skeletal Mage one. And then with the Golems, I like the Blood one that absorbs 30% of the damage that you take. Now in the other version, again, I will include both of these in the pin and the link in the bio, that you would want to sacrifice the golem here to get increased critical strike damage, because everything about minions is all about crit. You can actually run the grandfather if you want to as well, but the big problem with grandfather is you lose out on 2 aspects, and then you also lose out on that massive amount of damage, because remember, this whole build's about mages. You want like the double damage chance. If you get these triple masterwork, yeah, you can get it close to 100%, but honestly, realistically, it's kind of rare. But that is going to be it for the Book of the Dead. Again, if you want to run the mage solo version, then you would grab this. Again, I will link both of them for you guys. And then also for the boss powers. So here's what we play. We run Urivar's Loud Bombs. This gives us extra cooldown reduction on our ultimate. It actually facilitates a pretty good amount of damage. I know that there is a potion variant where you get this corruption build for Necromancer that's really strong as well. I'll cover that in a separate video because it's a completely different build. I want this to be focusing on the brand new minion stuff. So this one I think is one of the best ones because it does have that ability to again give us extra ultimate cooldown reduction. You can also use it in the modifier slot as well if you want to, but I like this setup over here. And then this one is just going to give us 70% crit. Remember, our minions gain our stats, so that's how we have 100% crit with the build. Next up, because minions are all about attack speed, I really liked Taurus Rage. This one could be swapped out for something else if you already reached the attack speed cap. And then we're also running the Beastmaster's Training, which makes it for summons. So basically, we get 150x multiplier. Pretty good stuff. So yeah, we definitely want this. There's also an ability where whenever you use a summon skill, you get to get the taunt, which is not that bad, but also like giving them that 97% damage reduction. It's a crazy amount of damage reduction, but again, you're not going to really need it. That's for the main power. I really feel like they should have made it so when you activate a summon skill, something else would happen, like a minion would grow and do kind of like a Ring of Mendel big explosion or something, but yeah, that's already in the build. But that's it for the boss powers. Alright, now for the skill tree. So for the skill tree, the first few points don't matter. If you want to get this one where it forms a corpse, go for it. And then the next set of points, you want this Supernatural Blight, which is going to make it so you get another 20x multiplier for you and your minions. If you want to play with Air Perdition, you're going to need to put a point into Blood Mist. If not, well, you can go ahead and drop it, but it's up to you on how you want to run it. We get all of the damage multipliers. This is for the Zoo variant. I really like the Zoo variant of the build, specifically with Golem, but again, I will include both of them. We actually want this cooldown reduction on Decrepify because the ultimate actually does do really good damage, and we want to get all the shadow stuff because our whole build is pretty much based off of the mages, although the Ring of Meldon still can proc and it will help your entire build. We want Finality because we get another multiplier. It's basically like Behemoths, but in the passive tree. We want to get all of the bonuses over here. Again, if you do not want Golem, then do not put points into the Golem. It's up to you. I personally like it. The Golem does actually deal damage too. It's just that he is obviously one where you get multiple of the other ones because, well, that's kind of just how the build works. And over here, you get extra critical strike chance over here. Now, you don't really need to get too much into this. You can remove this completely if you already reach 100% crit. Remember, you are gaining a huge amount of crit. You already have 70 right here. You have a base of 5, so you have 75 pretty much guaranteed without your pieces of gear. Now, if you happen to get a good roll on your Blood Moon Breaches, that could be something to factor in. There may be some on the Paragon if you want to invest into it, but for the most part, you will get 100% crit. The math over here would be that you just get this number of crit here, and as long as this number is at least 30%, you will then have 100% crit because, well, this gets added on to that critical strike chance of 70. It just doesn't show up in the sheet. In fact, there's so many things in Diablo, by the way, that it will not appear correctly inside of the sheet unless you're outside of town. But as far as the also, if you want to max out on res, you could probably get a little bit more in terms of diamonds, but I opted to make sure we were maxed out on armor first. Remember, I also have a Harlequin here, so that will really help out with armor. We could remove one of these and then basically get pretty much res cap. We can throw another diamond here. But remember, armor is way more important than your resistances in the game. But as far as the skill tree, that's what it's looking like. And then we're over here, we were like talking about the Golem Mastery and want to invest in Hellbent Commander, but we were talking about the crit here. And then we want to max out Soul Rift. Soul Rift applies your vulnerability. It also gives you a good damage multiplier of up to 150%, which is really, really cool. And then you also, gets to apply the vulnerability, and then when it ends, it fears and slows the enemy, so you get that crowd control as well. And then we're getting Kalan's Edict. I already talked about the bonus that you get with it. Now for the Paragon board. So normally, in a lot of minion builds, you'll see them play Corporeal, which is definitely a glyph that you can throw in, but remember, we are all about the Shadow Mages for this build, so we do lose out on the movement speed. However, with my build in particular, I happen to get Sacrilegious Soul with a Yugioh movement speed. You're going to have overcapped movement speed with this build, and that's great. You can see our movement speed, because I always feel like this is important with minion builds, because, well, the Necromancer doesn't really have a good source of mobility unless you were throwing that power on your boots. But as far as the movement speed over here, you can see we're at 200%, and if I remove that, I'm at 190. So even without this, you don't need to get a GA on movement speed. It's just what happened to roll over here. You will have your movement speed pretty much maxed out, because in the skill tree, there is a lot of movement speed as well. But yeah, Exploit is going to be our first one over here, and then we are going to be going up into the Frailty. So cursed enemies, again, your minions will automatically curse the enemies. We're going to be running Essence, again, everything is all about crit in here. And then we're going to move on to the third board over here, which is Cult Leader, so your minions get increased damage for more attack speed. This is why you want attack speed and you want crit, because there's a lot of things that just scale as crit for the multiplier over here. I'm going to be putting Dead Razor specifically in here, because it gives you that bonus for your minions here. And then we're going to go into the next board, which is Flesh Eater. So in the harder version of the build, you will have to consume corpses manually. This one, with the Ring of the Sacrilegious Soul, it will automatically do it. This is why I really recommend this one for beginners. It's so much more friendly for people to play. And in this board, we're going to be getting Amplify, so if songs are cursed, they're going to take more damage for you. And then we have all these bonus damage to elites, which is essentially where the minions will kind of get to focus fire, and they'll do a lot more damage here. But then in our last board over here, we are going to be running Eliminator. So all these extra int points, by the way, get these last, because it's just giving you basically double the amount. But Eliminator inside, what I'm playing is Hulking Monstrosity. Now, like I said, I will have two different planners. The other version of the build will actually run something else instead. And the skill tree is going to be a little bit different. Basically, on the Corpse Tendrils, you can get this thing where it will spawn a Blood Orb. The Blood Orb will then give you more damage. It's very inconsistent, but there is nothing else here in this last category. And even in a lot of minion builds, they still play it, because there's really nothing else to play, unfortunately. So that is pretty much the most that you would get. So it's either Hulking Monstrosity. If you want the Golem to hit really hard, this is there. There's anything that's super special in this one, but you can get that one or the Blood. Doesn't really matter. The last board is completely up to you. But have some fun with this build, Necros. Like I said, it is pretty fun, but in terms of the best build, I want to say it all has to be around the boss powers. But I at least want to show you guys everything that's going to be coming out, as, not everyone has to play the S tier meta builds, and I like covering the meta and the non-meta stuff. But if you want them like the meta build, I'm pretty sure it's going to be that Fire Sword build. I will also link it down below, because there's always someone that says this isn't the best build. Hey, I get it, but I like to share everything with you guys. And honestly, these Blade of Zero over here was a really cool idea. I tried it. I didn't have insane results with it, but if anyone has insane results with this, definitely let me know, because I wanted to try out this other build. It's not necessarily a minion build, it's more of an Army of the Dead build, which is weird, because it doesn't, a lot of the stuff will tag the minion stuff, but it doesn't essentially work with this, and most of the time you're still going to get way more damage with the variant where you hit the potion and does the corruption damage. That's probably going to be the meta Necromancer build, but I want to give you guys this build as you guys had asked for it, and you guys were wondering if it's good. Honestly, it's very similar to the previous season in terms of its playstyle. You just kind of activate Soul Rift, but the cooldown is much easier, because you have another 5 seconds. This is a flat 5 seconds, which is really big, because when you reduce cooldown to a certain point, it's really hard to get any amount of seconds off, and that again will help out significantly. But this is a completely different build, and it's also a two-hander. It's kind of rough to play this, but nonetheless, I may drop a guide on this, but at the moment I would say it is quite underwhelming in terms of the Army of the Dead one. Also, really quick, I'm going to go ahead and include a Belial boss fight using the build. Now, one thing that you will also notice with this build is that you will need to generate corpses. It's basically oriented around the open world content, because again, Tormented 4 is much more challenging. Now, I did go ahead and take down Belial, which is the brand new Super Omega boss that we're getting. You will have to learn the mechanics of the boss fight, but I don't think that that's a bad thing, and more than likely this build will probably not be nerfed, which is something to look forward to. However, it's not going to 100% one-shot the boss. Again, if you're looking for a one-shot boss build, I would probably look at the Sorceress or the Necromancer with specifically the potion build, where you pop a potion and it shoots out these lasers. However, those may get nerfed, whereas this, I see it as something currently, because everything we're talking about is on the BTR, I see this potentially getting a buff or maybe staying the same. If it does happen to stay the same, I would say that it is capable of doing the forms of content. I mean, if you guys want a boss fight that lasts like a minute or two, I think that that's okay. I don't think that means like the build isn't necessarily terrible or bad, unless of course you're comparing it to a build which will delete the boss before the boss gets to even attack, which again, Blizzard have said that they more likely want us to kind of engage with the boss. So who knows what will happen at the end of the day. Maybe we're going to be doing one-shots again. Maybe they'll buff this build and it will also one-shot. But it's not too bad. It's like a 1 minute-ish run. But there is the Uber Belial, just so you guys can kind of see for reference, can it complete, the hardest brand new boss that we've gotten. And this is the brand new boss at the hardest difficulty. But there's a boss kill. But maybe there's some other unintended interaction that we'll figure out. But anyways, that's going to be the build, guys. Have some fun with it. If there's any ways to improve it, let me know down below, and I'll be updating the planner, and I'll link both of the versions down below. But if you guys enjoyed the video, drop a like on it. If you're new here, hit subscribe to the bell if you want to see an update to this build, as well as more future builds for Diablo and other games. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out.